Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the 2022 LA Bowl matchup between the Washington State Cougars and the Fresno State Bulldogs. Both teams have had good seasons getting to this point. You got Washington State, who finished out the season at 7-5. This team has quietly had a good season. They've been one of the better teams in the Pac-12 this year. They haven't made a whole lot of noise, but this team finished out at 7-5. Not a bad season for the Cougars. And they're taking on Fresno State. Finished out the season at 9-4. At one point, Fresno State was 1-4 this season. They were 1-4 heading into middle October, and turns out this team finished out at 9-4 and the Mountain West champion. So quite a story Fresno State has been this season. Should make for a good matchup. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting with their team trends. Washington State lost to Washington 33-51, a high-scoring loss. And that's been common in the Pac-12 this season. We've seen plenty of high-scoring games. There have been plenty of high-powered offenses in the Pac-12 this season, and the Cougars fell short there. But once again, 7-5, not a bad season for the Cougars. They really haven't been. I mean, there wasn't really a point where Washington State was considered a big contender in the Pac-12, but they've kind of been in the background as one of the better teams in the conference, but not a big contender. As for Fresno State, they beat Boise State 20-16 to win the Mountain West Championship. Once again, this team, they're 9-4, but at one point this season, they were 1-4. They looked down and out once they lost to Boise State back in early October. That sent them to 1-4, and they got a couple of wins there in the later parts of October. Jake Hayner started playing again, and this team hasn't looked back, and they're 9-4 on the season. You could say one of the hottest teams in the country. Who would have imagined back in mid-October that Fresno State would turn out to be the Mountain West champion and get up to 9 wins, at least for that matter. This team has a chance to go from 1-4 to 10-4. That's a possibility here for Fresno State. Games to be on Saturday, December 17th in Inglewood, California. And your kickoff is 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going Fresno State by 3. Over-under is 54.5. And the FPI is going Washington State 57.2%. So there is a disagreement between the spread and the FPI here. The spread is favoring Fresno State, but the FPI is going decently on Washington State's side. Series history: Washington State leads at 3-1. They won the past 2. Last game was in 1994, so it's been a while since we last saw these two teams play each other. Your stat comparison: Washington State is 62nd in points per game, 32nd in points allowed, so a strong defensive team here in Washington State. They have been pretty good in the passing game this season. Cameron Ward, the Incarnate Word transfer, has had actually a good season for the Cougars, over 3,000 yards of passing, 23 touchdowns, 8 picks. Overall, solid stats for Ward this season, and that's kind of what we expected out of him, as he was a big standout at Incarnate Word before he was at Washington State. So this has been a strong passing offense. The rushing game, not so much. You got Nakia Watson, who's been the top rusher with just over 700 yards and 8 touchdowns, but otherwise this backfield hasn't been terribly deep. And then for yards allowed, they're 111th in passing, 37th in rushing, so a strong rush defense here. As for Fresno State, they're 41st in points per game, 26th in points allowed. Also a strong defensive team here in Fresno State, but statistically, they're also fairly good they're fairly good offensively, as they are averaging right around 31 points a game. If you compare that with Washington State, the Cougars are averaging right around 28 points a game. And as for Fresno State, you got a strong passing offense here with Jake Hayner, who's been the primary starter at quarterback. He didn't play in the later parts of September and into October because of an injury, so instead we saw Logan Fife. And ever since Jake Hayner got back in late October, that's where this team has really taken off. And I mean, they're 17th in pass yards allowed. That's another big strength of this team, is the passing defense. Their rush yards a game is 94th in the country. They're also 26th in points allowed, so a strong defensive team here as well. And so if you compare these two teams, you see Fresno State is a strong team in the passing game. Washington State is weak in the passing defense. They're 111th in the country in pass yards allowed. And if you look at Washington State, they're 29th in pass yards a game. That's one of their main strengths. But you're going up against a Fresno State pass defense that has been 17th in the country. So, I mean, if you look at both sides here, Fresno State is the better team statistically, and they also match up well against Washington State if you compare their stats. Your recent matchups, the Cougars lost to Washington 33-51, so a high-scoring, disappointing loss there. But, I mean, once again, this team played pretty well prior to that game. They beat Arizona on the road 31-20, beat Arizona State 28-18, also beat Stanford 52-14. That was after losing to Utah 17-21. Close game there against Utah, who turned out to be the Pac-12 champion this season. As for Fresno State, they beat Boise State 28-16, won the Mountain West there, beat Wyoming, shut them out 30-0, beat Nevada 41-14, beat UNLV 37-30, and also beat Hawaii 55-13. So Fresno State, obviously a really odd team. They've played very well down the stretch, and you compare that with Washington State, who's been kind of an up and down team. But I mean, for the most part, the Cougars getting up to 7 wins. It's still been a good season for the Cougars. Key points for this one: Washington State 7-5. They've quietly been a good team in the Pac-12 all season. I mean, the Pac-12 in general, you got those top 6 teams there between USC and Washington, Oregon, Utah, Oregon State, UCLA. I mean, for a while it was just USC, Oregon, Utah, and UCLA at the top before Washington and Oregon State kind of cracked that top 4. But Washington State has been in the number 7 position in the Pac-12 all season. They've been in this position all year. They haven't made a whole lot of noise, but they've been a decent team. Everyone's known that. They've got a talented quarterback in Cameron Ward, and they have played a tougher schedule than Fresno State. That is something to keep in mind. They have taken on teams like Utah and Oregon and USC and Washington. And even if you look back, I mean, I know Wisconsin was a disappointment this season, but they did win in Madison against Wisconsin this season. That's not an easy place to play, let alone win. So the Cougars have had a stronger schedule and have performed pretty well. As for Fresno State, Bulldogs are the Mountain West champions. Statistically, they match up really well against the Cougars once again, if you look at their stats. And they're a strong team on both sides of the ball. So you got Fresno State there. And there's a reason why this team eventually won eight straight games and won a Mountain West titles, because this team really found their stride and they've really improved over the course of the season. So, and that also explains why Fresno State is a favorite in this matchup. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Washington State and Fresno State coming up here in the LA Bowl. And I'm going to be going with Fresno State to win this one 34-27. One of the tougher ones to predict of the early part of bowl season. I think Fresno State is a good team. Washington State is very much capable to win this one. I went back and forth, but I think Fresno State, once again, they've really found their stride. They've won 8 straight. I mean, down the stretch, they've especially played well. They just beat up Nevada 41-14 a couple of weeks ago. Shut out Wyoming 30-0 defensively, really strong there. And just beat Boise State, no problem, in the Mountain West championship game. I think with that said, Fresno State is to me the better team in this matchup. And once again, statistically, they do match up really well against Washington State. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to win this one 34-27. I think Washington State keeps it close, but in the end, honestly, I could see this being a game where Fresno State leads for the majority of the time, but Washington State kind of hangs in there. But yeah, the Bulldogs will go with them 55%. Over-under is 54.5. Give me the over for this one. And Fresno State to cover the spread in the end, which is currently 3 points towards them. So anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.